So Preston, you came to me and you had this you hit me up privately and you're like, "Hey, I got the great idea for a topic we could discuss." And it's about Tyrion and I'm like, "Huh, interesting. Tell me more." And then you told me it involves Littlefinger. Say no more.
Yeah,
I'm in. Let's
right.
what is
Well, the
this?
topic the topic is perhaps like the biggest plot hole in the entire series. I'm going to go that big. Like it's
Hmm.
arguable about what the biggest plot hole in the whole series is. And there's like little mistakes here, or how we've discussed how it's kind of ridiculous that like Ned came to the conclusion that Cersei was committing incest. Realizing that she was having an affair is one thing, but the incest is a big jump.
And
Like
you're and
those
there
are,
was a theory behind it that maybe it involved Lyanna and Benjen incest and that's why incest was on his mind.
one could still make the argument that, yeah, okay, it's a little bit of a stretch, but Ned still just made that jump,
By the way, for those
and
of you wondering about that video, it's on my channel. It's called "The One Plot Hole You Didn't Notice in Game of Thrones." That's the
yeah.
video we discuss it in.
So this is what many fans consider to be the greatest plot hole of the entire series. So I'm building it up. It has to do with the dagger. In A Game of Thrones, Catelyn, arrests Tyrion because she believes that Tyrion's dagger was used to attack Bran. And then Tyrion says, "No, that wasn't my dagger. That's ridiculous. Who told you that?" And she says, "Peter Baelish, like Peter told me that." And in A Game of Thrones, Tyrion's like, "Dude, you believe Littlefinger? Like Littlefinger's the biggest liar in the world. Like what? Like come on." Logically speaking, like this is the start of the war. Like Catelyn arresting Tyrion triggers almost everything. Littlefinger it's his fault. Everything is going forward and becoming a big mess. And Tyrion knows this. And so he arrives in King's Landing at the beginning of A Clash of Kings. He arrives with, his mountain clans, the letter declaring that he is the hand. He has all of this power. He arrives and he does nothing with Littlefinger. He does nothing to address like what Littlefinger did. He should have killed Littlefinger immediately, but he does nothing. And just a reminder, like A Clash of Kings begins with Tyrion and Cersei having a remarkably honest conversation. Uh, Admittedly, more on Cersei's side, where Cersei just openly talks about everything. She openly admits to Tyrion that she murdered Robert. She like honestly says she had nothing to do with Jon Arryn's death. All sorts of things. They discuss all the events of A Game of Thrones and try to set things straight. So really, Tyrion had every opportunity to say, we should take care of Littlefinger. In fact, in that conversation, he even says that Tywin was thinking about executing people on the small council because he didn't think they were loyal. So he already had like the tacit approval of Tywin. He should have been wanting to do it himself because of that situation. Like Tyrion almost died. He was in a sky cell. He went through that whole ordeal. He had to go to and from the Vale and nearly died. And the entire war has started because of this lie from Littlefinger. And Tyrion proceeds to do nothing. Instead, he starts quizzing Cersei about Janis Slynt and why Janis Slynt so quickly beheaded Ned and how they need to get rid of Janis Slynt, which I have like, who cares? Like Janis Slynt was taking orders. Like he wastes all of this time making sure that Janis Slynt is removed from being the head of the Gold Cloaks and stripped of Harrenhal and sent to the Wall, which for following orders, like, and I mean, I guess it's also, I think Tyrion was upset that he had ordered Al-Ardim to execute the baby, Robert's baby, and he was a little upset about that. But it's like everybody else has killed so many people that there's no reason he should be wasting his time on Janis Slynt. I mean, clearly George just needed Janis Slynt to be at the Wall because he planned on having Jon behead Janis Slynt and have that clash. So he needed to get Janis Slynt to the Wall. But there's little reason for Tyrion to be wasting so much time on Janis Slynt when Littlefinger is the one that controls Janis Slynt and Littlefinger's the one that started the war, and Tyrion doesn't do anything. Like he does nothing. He even thinks like, me and Littlefinger, we need to have a discussion about that dagger. And then they never have a discussion about the dagger. He meets with him and he thinks that he thinks in his mind that Peter knows that he knows about the dagger, but they never have a conversation about it, and they never have a standoff. And later on, Littlefinger causes just even more trouble.
The funny thing is, doesn't Littlefinger act against Tyrion as if his life depended on it by trying to frame him for Joffrey's murder?
Yeah, but there's so many reasons to get rid of Tyrion and Joffrey with Joffrey's murder,
but to blame it on Tyrion specific, I mean, maybe that was just a happy accident, but at the same time, the dwarves and all that. At the wedding. Here's the funny thing is,
you're absolutely right about the dwarves. Like, he wanted Tyrion to be angry. He wanted conflict between Tyrion and Joffrey.
Well, here's a quote from Tyrion 4, Clash of Kings. From Tyrion. No one had ever thought to question the appointments. Why should they? Littlefinger was no threat to anyone. A clever, smiling, genial man, everyone's friend, always able to find whatever gold the king or his hand required, and yet such undistinguished birth, one step up from a hedge knight. He was not a man to fear. He had no banners to call, nor army of retainers, no great stronghold, no holdings to speak of, no prospects of a great marriage. But do I dare touch him? Even if he is a traitor. He was not at all certain he could, at least for now, while the war raged. So, yeah, it's kind of weird because it clearly crosses his mind to act against Littlefinger, but then it's all kind of brushed aside, which is very weird. Like, was this even a plot point in the show?
They get around it in the show by having the conversation off screen. So you're not sure how much information Catelyn has given to Tyrion. And in the show, there's one look that Tyrion gives Littlefinger when he first arrives on the small council, but that's it. There's no interaction between the characters until I think he tries to set up the marriages. Do you remember the triple scene where he goes to Pycelle and he goes to Varys and he goes to Littlefinger and he offers the 3 marriages to see who the mole is? That's like the first time they have a conversation again. So they kind of, they get away with it in the show by just not having the information out, and then, you're not in Tyrion's mind. But clearly, like, Tyrion knows it's an issue. George tries to cover it up by saying later on, like, oh, well, Littlefinger has too many people in powerful positions. It's dangerous to take out Littlefinger, which I think is the most bullshit, like, reason. Like, you took out Janis Slint, the head of the Gold Cloaks. Like, think about how many allies Janis Slint has.
But Janis Slint has no money.
Right, but Janis Slint is also, like, first of all, you're also pissing off Littlefinger because that was, Littlefinger's appointment. And Littlefinger, like, did that whole deal. But also, Janis Slint, like, has the loyalty of all of these men that he's worked with for years. Right,
but Tyrion, coming from money himself, knows what wealth can do and how that moves things. And by the way, I did find it here. The Starks do not murder men in their beds, nor do I, Tyrion said. I tell you again, I had no part in the attempt to kill your son. The assassin was armed with your dagger. Tyrion felt the heat rise in him. It was not my dagger, he insisted. How many times must I swear to that? Lady Stark, whatever you may believe of me, I am not a stupid man. Only a fool would arm a common footpad with his own blade. Just for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But what she said was, why would Peter lie to me? And to which Tyrion replies, why does a bear shit in the woods? He demanded. Because it's in his nature. Lying comes as easily as breathing to a man like Littlefinger. You ought to know that, you of all people.
One thing generally I think that George doesn't get right in the book very well, actually this goes for the show too, is that the King's Landing crew has been living together for years and years and years. And so it's...
King's Landing crew, you mean?
I mean, like, Stannis, not Selyse, because Selyse is on Dragonstone, but Stannis, Jon Arryn, Lysa, Sweet Robin, Renly, Tyrion, Littlefinger, Varys. They've all been living at court together for years. But during the events of A Song of Ice and Fire, you feel like Tyrion is just getting to know these characters, you know? And you're like, you've known them for years. And so he makes this statement like, oh, like Littlefinger lies all the time because Tyrion has known him for years. But then when A Clash of Kings comes around, he's kind of like, oh, I just discovered all of these things about Peter Baelish, like his life and, you know, who he owns and what appointments are his. I mean, it might be that Tyrion was just so out of it and only banging whores and whatever and was not playing the Game of Thrones and wasn't thinking about it, but it's just, it just doesn't seem right. It's the same when he like goes to the Vale and is face to face with Lysa and Sweet Robin. He acts like he hasn't known these people for years and that Sweet Robin is like a child he's just run into for the first time.
Well, to be fair, is there a reason for Tyrion to be at court? Is there a reason for Tyrion to be in King's Landing all the time, surrounded by these people?
I don't know if there is. I mean, I don't know why he's not at Casterly Rock, but he is, like, he does live in King's Landing, though. I think just because he wants to hang out with his siblings.
I mean, you mean sibling. I don't think Cersei wants to hang out with him, but...
Sure. I don't know that they ever established a reason for Tyrion to be at court, but he is at court. Like, he does know these people for years. Like, he is just one of those people that's at court. You know, how like Balon Swan is just at court, you know, you're like, okay, he's one of the guests of the crown that's just living there.
I mean, I'll take your argument that like he has probably, you know, a house in King's Landing if he's ever around, if he's ever in town. I'll take that, but I would argue maybe the real reason is because, you know, we're seeing King's Landing from Tyrion's eyes, and therefore we need to kind of really meet these characters again after the first book, because we saw them through Ned's eyes. Now it's time to really get to know them through Tyrion's eyes. That's the real response. But you could argue that maybe Tyrion never really knew Littlefinger because he hasn't been to King's Landing in so long, and maybe since then Littlefinger has risen in power and position.
Well, they're at least always hanging out and betting on the tilts, right? Like, we know that happens. We know that he, Renly, and Littlefinger constantly bet on the tilts. Like, every time there's a jousting tournament or something that Robert wants to have. Mm-hmm. So they're at least interacting that much. I don't know. Plus, doesn't Littlefinger own a brothel? Like, doesn't Tyrion like going to brothels?
Okay. That's also fair. So,
but I'm just saying, so say you're Tyrion. Imagine you're Tyrion. And that's... It's also just the weirdness of the conversation that he has with Cersei. Like, they're so obsessed with Ned getting executed and how that went down and forgetting about how the war started. You know, he asks her about Jon Arryn's murder. And he talks about how Lysa thought that he was responsible for Jon Arryn's murder. And then they jump to Ned's execution and who's responsible for that. And he doesn't have any conversation with Cersei about the dagger, which is ridiculous. And then he spends all his time on Janis Slynt, who I don't even think was really a threat that needed to be removed and sent to the wall. But he makes sure that he deals with Janis Slynt first, rather than dealing with Littlefinger. It takes him weeks before he even like goes to him and has a conversation, and thinks in his head, as you were the quote you had earlier about how maybe it's too dangerous to remove Littlefinger, which is just bullshit. Like, if you kill the guy, he's dead. What are his people going to do?
That's true. Can't pay. Dead man can't pay you.
Right. Tywin was looking to kill people. Tyrion should be looking to kill him. Cersei's not going to care. Like, just kill Littlefinger. They try to have this whole, oh, he's a genius with money and he's got powerful men in powerful places that no one thought about. And so maybe he's untouchable. And it's just bull. Tyrion is a person who sent Janis Slynt to the wall, ordered Alar Dîm to be thrown overboard. I know you're laughing because it's... you and
Alar Dîm.
He orders the killing of Simon Silvertongue. I don't know if Alar Dîm or Simon Silvertongue are dead, but he certainly orders their killings. He's got this like crew of Vale mountain clans like at his disposal. He has Bronn. Just just kill Littlefinger. Like it makes no sense that he's not killing Littlefinger.
It would make more sense if there was a moment where he tried to have Littlefinger removed, and Littlefinger somehow just got out of it, either by bribing people or because he's like that clever. That would make more sense. But there's no. What you're saying is there's no attempt here. Therefore, it's
yeah. I mean, that would have been interesting had there just been like he sent one of the mountain clans to like take care of Littlefinger, and he was like the mountain clan guy was found dead, and like and it gives Tyrion a little bit of pause, like, oh, well that's weird, or he sends somebody to kill Littlefinger, and the person ends up dead, and then Varys says, I think we need Littlefinger alive for X and X mysterious reason. And that gives him pause, like something. But instead he just waits. He sits around. I mean, it's just so Hamlet, like thinking around with, thinking about action and not doing it. But also he's just doing all of these other actions. That's why I listed as number one plot hole of the series.
It's been so long since I've read a Game of Thrones. I actually had forgotten that Catelyn actually tells Tyrion, or says it out loud, that it was Littlefinger behind the whole thing. And the fact that they never really kind of addressed that, and the dagger with Bran, like...
Oh, and also, like, Tyrion, I think, also starts wondering if Catelyn told the truth. And you're like, come on, Catelyn was definitely telling the truth. There should not be any doubt in your mind that Catelyn was telling the truth. Like, she's not exactly a known actress, He's on the road with her for weeks. But, he wonders, like, oh, could Catelyn have been lying to me about Littlefinger? Like, come on. No. Like, you've known Littlefinger for years. He's a scoundrel. He's a liar. You told Catelyn that, like, lying is just what Littlefinger does. You know who he is. And, he'd be too dangerous. He started the war. He should be killed. And
Preston, you wound me, but I like I said, I love characters like Littlefinger that... They're not like strong like Arthur Dayne or Barristan, they don't have great sword fighting skills. It's just the mind. So I love characters like that. On the topic of Tyrion, real quick, a friend of mine is reading through A Dance with Dragons, and he comes across the moment where Tyrion and Jorah encounter the Widow.
Yeah, the Widow of the Waterfront.
And he's pissed because he's a fan of the show, or not the last two seasons, of course. And he kind of is annoyed with how the show never really went balls enough. Like he's pissed with how the show was never really ballsy enough to portray Tyrion as he was in the books post killing Shay. You complain about it too. How in the books Tyrion, as soon as he gets Essos,
he's dark. He's dark.
He's dark as fuck. At one point, the widow asks him. I have the quote right here. Let me grab to it real quick. This is the one that he stood out to him that he sent to me. I'm trying to find it if you don't mind. Where is it? Here it is. She asks him, "What do you plan to offer the Dragon Queen, little man?" "My hate," Tyrion wanted to say. Instead, he spread his hand as far as his feathers would allow. "Whatever she would have of me: sage counsel, savage wit, a bit of tumbling, my cock if she desires it, my tongue if she does not. I will lead her armies or rub her feet as she desires. And the only reward I ask is that I might be allowed to rape and kill my sister." Yeah, he's that's some dark shit.
Yeah.
And he's annoyed that they never really portrayed Tyrion as being this much of a vengeful asshole in the show. In the show, he's still later on trying to defend Cersei and Jaime.
And he makes lots of jokes about wanting to have sex with Cersei, all through the books, and they eliminate every single one in the show. But yeah,
I mean, I will say I'll defend David Dan on eliminating the moment where he the threats to Tommen.
Yeah.
I won't go into detail on that one, because I don't want your video demonetized, but because that shit is fucked up. But my buddy was talking to me about how he kind of prefers this Tyrion a bit more in the books than in the show, because here, like, as awful and as insane as he gets, it's a bit more realistic if you think about it. Like, here you have someone who was shunned by the very city he helped save. His dad wants to have him killed. His lover betrays him, and his only friend in the world and only family member he thought he could really trust just told him the truth about Taisha.
Yeah.
Like it just makes sense. Like he'd go down this dark spiral, especially the Taisha thing, which is like the perfect chef's kiss to close that door on any like amount of compassion he might have for these people down the line.
Yeah, the Taisha thing, I mean, if one were going to make the argument at least on why is Tyrion wasting his time on Janis Slynt and Al Ardim rather than Littlefinger, the answer is, I suppose, well, because he's really upset about them killing a sex worker's child, and that he wants to save all sex workers, because of the Taisha incident,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah, that would be the argument. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is in the show they have him be this fun-loving, at the beginning, fun-loving lover of sex workers and their services, and then rather than him becoming even darker and getting into his like Taisha and Shay and all of those feelings of insecurity and in his life about his masculinity and his worth, and this all relates to his father too. Instead of delving into that pit, which is a huge pit, they just kind of have the killing of his father and the killing of Shay cure him, right? He
I don't want to look at it like that, but
I mean, right? Like, other than after vomiting in front of Varys at Illyrio's house in the show, he's cured. He's cured of all his insecurities and hang-ups and everything, right? Like, he's just cured. He's now on the Dany train. Dany has given him hope, and he has no reason to do anything dark and evil ever again. After murdering his dad and his girlfriend.
Yeah, ex-girlfriend. That's a very important.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. That's all you need to be cured. Then you can go to Essos and be in a prostitution den, and when a sex worker wants to give you a freebie, you can say no, I just can't, and that makes you a good person.